Welcome to the Second Service Podcast. I'm Matt, and I'm here with Joey. Joey, who are we speaking with today?
Hey, today we've got a really exciting guest. It's one of our friends from the University of San Francisco MAPL program. It's Aaron Brennan. Aaron Brennan is local here in San Diego, where we're recording our show. And he has been with the San Diego Fire Rescue Department for 2 decades. And in 2020, he ran for city council. And he's also a member of the U.S. Navy Reserves, as am I. So I'm really excited to chat with our good friend Aaron and learn a little bit more about his campaign and why he decided to run and how the program helped him out.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it. All right, welcome to the second episode of the Second Service Podcast, and we're really excited to be talking to our really good friend Aaron Brennan from the MAPL program. And I want to start off, Aaron, talking about your service in the Navy Reserve. I'm a Navy reservist as well, Lieutenant Public Affairs. What kind of drew you to the Navy Reserve specifically? And can you tell us a little bit about your role and kind of what you experience as a reservist?
For sure. Thanks for having me. I guess the easiest thing to do is just sort of give you an origin story. I was in college at Cal State Northridge, and I didn't have money to pay for college. So I started exploring options to do that. And they had a pretty unique program at the time. It's since been discontinued, called the Sea Air Mariner program, or the SAM program. And basically you went to boot camp and an A school, as long as it was short enough to limit your active duty order time to a certain number, I think under 130 days. And then you went to a mandatory drilling reservist status. So a little bit of an alternate route into the reserves, instead of doing, a couple of years active duty and then transferring, it was kind of a straight into the reserves thing. And yeah, my motivation was I just needed some cash to pay for school. So that's how I got into it. When I graduated, I transferred schools. I moved to San Diego, and when I graduated, I put the reserves on the shelf. I was like, I'm done. It got me where I needed to go, and whatever. And that lasted about 18 months. And I came back, and I was here until November 19th. I just did my retirement ceremony from the reserves. I transitioned from an enlisted guy, came in as an E1. I did 19 years enlisted. Wound up in Naval Special Warfare as a special boat operator, and then went to the dark side, put a commission on. I'm a surface operations LDO, a 6125 for anybody who wants the designator. And the cool thing was I got to stay in NSW. As a JO, they kind of don't really care where you're going, specifically if you're sort of an undesignated SWO type. You can just kind of make your own way. And I asked my CO, hey, do you got a hole for me? And he's like, absolutely, no way we're letting you go. So that was in 2010. So here we are 12 years later, and I just retired as an 04.
Wow, congratulations. That's really exciting.
And you just ran, I guess, in 2020 for San Diego City Council, correct? I mean, what exactly is the City Council? Like, do all cities have these elected councils, and how do they interact with, say, the mayor? Basically, can you give like a background on the whole role?
If you want to make a sort of parallel, a city council is the legislative body. So a state assembly or Congress, if you're looking at the federal level, is kind of the analogy or equivalent sort of body. So they're responsible for enacting policy, city applicable legislation for the city of San Diego. We're a pretty big city, 8th largest in the country. So it's a city council race here is like a state assembly or congressional district race in other places. I think there was 110,000 registered voters in my district.
How many seats are there in San Diego? And then how often do they have to run for re-election?
So we have 9 seats here in San Diego, just kind of geographically divided up. They're 4-year terms.
Okay.
We are term limited in San Diego, so you can run twice. And then they alternate. The even seats are in the midterm years, and the odd seats are in the presidential year election. So you're not replacing an entire council all at once.
Because I know a lot of folks that may be interested in getting into politics. Of course, they know about the big stuff, right? They know about the House of Rep, the Senate. They know about the state delegates for the most part. But there's all these other sorts of elected positions that people just have no clue, whether they exist, and then how to get involved and like run for something like that. So, what was the impetus for you getting involved in this particular race?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've always been sort of politically aware, active, if you will, but I honestly had never considered a run for politics. Was not on my radar in any form. And then I had a sort of a chance acquaintance, who I'm now friends with, but he suggested me. He said, "You ever think about running for office?" And I was like, "No." But then I started thinking about it, and then that was actually right before I deployed to Iraq. Well, not right before, but a little less than a year before I deployed to Iraq. So you have a little time to think when you're overseas like that. And the presidential election happened that year, so politics is really front and center. And yeah, I think I had been. I don't know, bothered by stuff that I was seeing occur in the city. And I was trying to think of a good way to sort of explain my emotional reasons for diving into this, because I think what you're asking is, why did you do it? Right. and your why is super important. It's the thing that you're going to talk to supporters, whether they're just somebody who's going to vote for you, or whether somebody's going to write you a check because they want to support your campaign. Or if you're asking for an endorsement, they want to know why you're doing it, because your why is your values, right? And people want to align with people who have similar values to them. So I think I had some good resonation with the idea, because my why was, I was pissed off. I was frustrated with how the city was doing things. I was tired of seeing elected officials go on TV or issue a statement about something and then turn around and do something that was sort of not in agreement with that. And so I had a little bit of, I guess you would say, imposter syndrome. Like, I didn't have a resume that said I should be a city council person for a eighth largest city in the country. But what I did have is a background of service, and I did 25 years with the city of San Diego as a lifeguard and as a firefighter. So I kind of had some pretty good ground level understanding of how the city worked, budget process. We've been through labor negotiations and understanding funding from everything from, building a new fire station to sewer and whatever. So my why was, I thought I could do it better than the person that was doing it. Pure and simple. And I think that in a big way, being a candidate validated that, even though I was eventually not successful in my race.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to kind of jump into in terms of how you mentioned your service experience. The kind of the goal for our show is to bring on guests who were in the military and that decided on a second service. You have served your community as you mentioned, firefighter, lifeguard, 25 years. You served in the Navy, and you wanted to serve the city council. In a kind of an overall, what type of leadership skills do you think a service member brings when they decide to run for politics and kind of go on to their second service? What assists them? Did you use your service as part of your campaigning and your message and kind of the leadership that you developed in serving? Was that something that was part of your message or your branding?
Well, I think something that the vast majority of service members bring to a candidacy is they're willing to put their head down and go. A campaign is a grind. Even the best campaign in the world is filled with a lot of moments that are not really great. They suck, to put it more colloquially. And service members have been in the suck, right? They know that if they show up and they keep chipping away at it, that they're going to knock it down. And so in that way, I think a lot of people who serve, they don't look at, something like running for office as some big insurmountable task. It's just a problem they got to solve. That's what they did or what they've done, their entire career, whether they're a junior enlisted guy, taking care of maintenance on a boat, or whether they're in the wardroom and they're making decisions about training schedules or whatever. They're just not daunted by what's can be a pretty enormous thing. There's a lot of moving parts to run a campaign. So as far as leadership, I don't know. I mean, I can go to Navy core values and say that's what led my campaign or my candidacy. But I think really it's just who I am. Right. I believe in integrity. I believe in doing what you say you're going to do. If you tell somebody you're going to show up for them. Politicians are famous for making promises that they don't fulfill. And I think, the political world is complicated. And sometimes when you find yourself in the situation, yeah, of course I will do that. And then reality turns out to be a little bit different. But I think service members in general bring the idea that I'm going to do what I said I was going to do, because it's my honor, it's my courage, it's my commitment, right? To weave those Navy values back in there. So I think that's how it sort of was underlying, my decision and how I ran my campaign.
And looking at that race in particular, correct in saying it was nonpartisan, right? So everyone running was not running on a party platform, correct?
Correct. The seat itself isn't nonpartisan. So, and what that means in elections is it doesn't say D or R or independent or whatever, green after your name on the ballot. However, campaigning is very partisan. The first question I got asked at almost every single door I knocked on was, what party are you? Right. Particularly if you think in the context of the 2020 election, we're about as hyper partisan as we've been as a country. And so a lot of people were just willing to make their decision based on that alone. My race was somewhat odd in that we were all from the same party. There was not any opposition party candidates there. And so then you're trying to differentiate yourself from the other people that are, kind of on the same team, which was a challenge. But ultimately, people prioritize different things, and that's how I drew the distinction. My priorities were on public safety and infrastructure, which I think is like kind of the basic functions of city council, and other people were worried about other things, and touting that as what they were going to prioritize if they were elected.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about some of those challenges. Can you take us through some of the moments during the campaign when you thought, man, this is a lot harder than I even imagined it could be, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Well, I got lucky in some ways because I had some good mentors. A friend of mine who's a sitting congressman, we had a phone call about fundraising and how to approach it. And he said, Aaron, it's going to feel super personal to you when you do it. And it is in a way, right? I mean, you're the person who's putting yourself up there for this thing. But what you have to understand is like you're eating, breathing, and sleeping politics, right? Your campaign, your fundraising, your get out the vote, all the aspects of being a candidate, endorsements. But when you call somebody that you went to college with and ask them for money for your campaign, they think about politics for maybe, a month or two before the election. And the rest of the year, they're not even thinking about it. And so you can't be offended when they're like, they were your ride or die buddy from high school, but now they're like, oh yeah, I could send you $50, and I had one very close, like in my wedding party type of friend who we've always been on opposite sides of the table with respect to our political views, but it never was an issue in our friendship. And it became an issue, a huge issue, and almost ended a friendship. And so those are the kind of things that they don't tell you in the campaign boot camp that you go to. It was tough, but luckily I had been given the advice that like, it's going to feel really personal, but it's not. And you need to step back from that and just remember that, whatever that relationship was prior to the campaign, that's what you need to focus on. And if the person, people support in different ways. Some people love writing a check because they're not interested in knocking doors or sending emails to their friends or, doing all the other sort of campaign stuff. Other people hate it, but they love making phone calls. And so you just have to meet people where they are. And I think that was one of the big lessons that I got. I think The other thing that really stood out to me as a candidate, as I mentioned, it's very partisan.
We've heard that in many cases, getting the checks are obviously very important, but that the endorsements themselves could be even more valuable than the checks being sent in. Did you find that, you know, the endorsements that you got helped to kind of propel your visibility?
Absolutely. I mean, I got the Police Officers Association and the Firefighters Union, uh, and I think unequivocally, like even though I didn't win, I would not have performed nearly as well as I did without those endorsements. Some of that is in the form of independent expenditures, right? When a group like that endorses you, then they want you to win, and they spend money to send out mail and stuff like that. So name recognition is a big one. People don't always do what they're going to tell you that they're going to do, and that can create to some pretty significant I don't know, feelings of betrayal, I guess I would say.
So did in any way the campaign kind of on the same line of thought, you know, you talk about some of the relationships that were strained. Was there any bitterness at the end of this campaign? I know losing is obviously painful, but was there any just kind of lingering bitterness, or are you ready to kind of let it go and move on and look to what's next for you?
Not for me. I mean, regret, yeah. Instantly, I came up 655 votes out of 43,000 cast from going to the general election. I finished in third by 655 votes, and I know. I don't guess or feel or believe. I know that had I been knocking doors for a month longer than I did, I would have made that ground up easily. And so, yeah, I regret, that my campaign wasn't as well-oiled a machine as it should have been, or that I didn't get my door piece, the literature that you hand out when you go knock in time. I had a delay getting that, and that delayed my walking, and that delayed those votes. And so you definitely do a post-mortem, what did I do wrong? What did I do? But I think, I don't know, people get into politics for different reasons. I was doing it to change the conversation. And in that respect, I think I won. I didn't win my race, but I knew I was making an impact when I was at a candidate forum. And there was a superb question asked by a member of the audience, and they said, let's pretend that I'm from the city's budget office, and I come to you as a newly elected council person and say, we found a 5% error in the budget. And so you actually have, and I think he said like $220 million to spend. The city of San Diego has a huge budget. Whatever, it was a big number. And he said, and we come to you as a council person and say, what are you going to spend that money on? Right. And I think where people spend their money tells you what their priorities are, right? It tells you what their values are. And so for me, it was an instant answer. It was completely in line with everything I had been campaigning on, which is, oh, well, we're 20 fire stations short of where we should be for a city our size. We're several hundred police officers below our budgeted staffing, let alone what we should be for a city our size. So that's it. I'm giving them raises. I'm building fire stations. I'm buying fire apparatus. I'm hiring more police officers. Easy question. Thank you for asking that. And the guy who's sitting in the city council office right now had not once talked about public safety. And he essentially parroted my answer. And that's when I knew that I was having an effect, right? Because now he had to try to go over there and grab that momentum or that support that I was showing at that point in time. So, yeah, I didn't win, but I kind of won, because the guy who won had to be aware of that this was an issue that should be fixed in the city. So, I mean, I think if that's not part of your motivation to run, you're missing the point. And you see it. You see candidates who it's just about, they want to be called sir, or your honor or whatever. They want that positional celebrity, I guess the word would be. And for me, it was never about that. I've been called sir for a decade. I don't need it at all. What I wanted was an ambulance to show up on time when I was on an emergency, and instead having to wait 30 or 40 minutes because it was coming from 18 miles away during rush hour. So that, for me anyway, I don't know. I didn't really feel like I lost. My friend, the guy who encouraged me to run, said, you can lose up or you can lose down. And he said, you lost up, right? Like you didn't win your race, but people care about what you have to say, and the people knew that you were, out there doing it for them. So yeah, I don't really have any bitterness whatsoever about it. And the obvious follow-up question, would you do it again? Would you run again? And the answer is yes, I would. If there's an opening and I see that there's not people who are representing what I think is the right priorities for the district, yeah, I'll run again. That might be a while because I don't believe in running against an incumbent from your own party. It's kind of bad form, and also super hard to be successful at. So I don't want to tilt it a windmill. But if somebody decides not to run for a second term or runs for something else and leaves the seat open, sure.
One of the things that I really like about those types of races is that you kind of have to come up with, people are looking for practical solutions to issues that are more local. Whereas on the big, you're talking the big congressional races, the federal races, I feel like all the candidates today are just parroting talking points from their respective parties. And it's you're casting a vote for a party, not a person. But I think when you're talking about what you're describing is something where they're really casting the vote for the person more so. And they're looking at, okay, does this person have practical solutions to problems we face? And I just don't see that at a federal level. So yeah, I think that's great. And I think I hope more people would get involved like you are in that regard, for sure.
As a candidate, you go to all these organizations, and in my case, I'm a Democrat. I was going to labor organizations. Unions are big supporters of Democrats, generally, not everywhere. And then within the Democratic Party, there's all these different affinity clubs. Democrats for Equality, environmental Democrats, veteran Democrats. These people. And so you go and try to receive their endorsement. And what I found from going to all these meetings and talking in front of all these people in these community groups and stuff is exactly what you said, that the partisan talking points were what was talked about in those things. But when I went and knocked on doors and I asked people what they cared about, I was 100% validated. They didn't care about the stuff that was being talked about in sort of the political circles. They cared about the fact that there's a giant pothole on their street that hasn't been fixed for 2 years. They cared about the fact that when their neighbor had a heart attack, it took forever for the ambulance to get there. And so for me, on just like a real personal level, I was like, yes, I was onto something, because that was why I was running. I was mad about that lack of service that it's basic public safety, right? That cities are supposed to provide, and that they weren't providing. And I knew firsthand from being on a fire engine that we weren't providing it as good as we could. And so, yeah, you have to choose a party as a candidate. It's, unless you're just fabulously wealthy, and then you can just run without, party support. But even then, endorsements matter. The mailers go out and stuff like that. So you need support from your party, whichever side of the fence you fall on. But I personally am not super partisan, because for me, it's about fixing the problem, not about did the R or the D win the seat. I think there are really good ideas and really good people that are not of my political party. But we get so caught up in what team we're on, instead of like addressing the needs that a community or a district has, that we kind of wind up doing a lot of nothing as a result.
Well, Aaron, this has been a really great conversation. I'm so appreciative that you said yes to this. This is, for us, the culmination of our experience here with the MAPA program that you've already, finished and graduated from. So thank you again. You've been so generous with your time, and this has been a wonderful conversation.
For me, even though I didn't wasn't successful in my race, I was successful in my Maple program. I met amazing people, and any opportunity I have to just sort of share what I learned from my experience and maybe make somebody else's road a little bit smoother, I'm gonna do it. Pure and simple.
That's awesome. And again, we just so appreciate it. So yeah, thanks again for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you run again.
Absolutely. Thanks.